So what we're going to be doing during the month of April is thinking about how do you create true love between you and your clients. And this is a mini series. The next 3 calls that we do together will all be focused on creating relationships that are so powerful and so satisfying to your clients that they would never think of going anywhere else. How do we get there? I'm sure you do that with many of your clients, but have you spent a lot of time really thinking about how you've done that successfully or where you've missed the mark? For all of us, we all succeed by building great relationships, and sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. What we want to spend time thinking about over these next 3 calls are what are some of the elements that can help us do that with a higher batting average going forwards. So each of these 3 sessions will be focused on that. And then starting with the next 90-day period, I'm going to start kind of a new series focused on 10 principles that I believe are really important to your success. I call them the 10 success principles for Compass agents. And I shared them last year with a number of folks, and they really wanted to hear more about them. So I'm going to bring them back this year and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So that's going to be starting in May. But for now, I'm going to be focusing on what is it that makes someone feel related to by you as a service provider. So first, a couple of things for those of you who don't know me. I've been a certified coach since 2005. I've coached people all around the world, people who work in Fortune 500s, people who work in small business startups, people who work in small businesses that have been established for many, many years. I've worked with people active in the United States, in Europe, in the Middle East, East Asia, and South America. I've been working with real estate agents and MLSs since 2016. That's where I first met Chirag. Chirag was on the board of an MLS here in the New York area. I live in Connecticut. And that's where I first met him. After I met him, we did a little work together. He signed up for my leadership program. I run a leadership program here just north of New York called Leadership Westchester. It's a 10-month, an intense 10-month leadership program. We pick 20 people from all walks of life. We put them together for 10 months, and we take a deep dive into who they are, what they want in their life, why they want it, and how they can get it. And so after he participated in that program, obviously we stayed in touch. And when he decided to start the business, he said, David, please come join me. I know that a lot of these agents can use some of the stuff that I've learned from you and other stuff. So I've been here since the beginning. It's been a delight to work with Chirag and the rest of the people at the team here. Nowadays, he and I co-facilitate the mastermind program that we have. I've coached many of you over the years, and I do these calls again. I'm delighted to be back here on Wednesdays to do these calls again. So who are these calls for? So for those of you who don't know me and don't know the kinds of things I talk about, here are some things that might give you a better sense of whether you're in the right place or not. These calls are for you if any of these are true. And if more than one of these are true, then probably these calls are definitely where you might want to spend some time. We'll be doing these calls every Wednesday at 8:30 through the rest of the year. So I'll always be around, and if you want a slightly different take on things, you'll get it here. I've never been an agent, so I'm not going to tell you how to manage your CRM, although I work with a lot of clients on that. My perspective and my value to CSC is that I come from things from slightly different direction from most of the other folks who've been, down in the middle of it for the last 10 or 15 years. So delighted to talk about all these things with you. So let's get started. Leadership and sales. Let me ask you a question. Are you a salesperson? Of course, the answer to that is yes. Chirag often says that. You're a salesperson first, last, and always. Well, let me ask you this question. Are you a leader? As I hinted before, my perspective on leadership is not that leaders are people who hold a position of authority over others. Although that's how we commonly look at leadership in America. We'll say someone is a leader because he or she holds a position of authority. But I've never believed that that's really the best way for us to conceive of the word leadership, because if that were the case, if leadership were by definition about positional authority, then every person with great positional authority would be a great leader by definition. Every team leader in real estate, every governor of every state, every president, every executive director of a nonprofit. And we know that that's not true. At the same time, if leadership were fundamentally about positional authority, then people without great positional authority could not be great leaders, again, by definition. And we also know that that's not true. People like Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa came out of the masses. They were not at the head of large, rich corporations. They were not elected to national office or anything like that. But they did an incredible job of creating some kind of an impact. And so one of the things I'd like to have everyone consider and think about for yourself is whether you lead yourself and no one else, or whether you lead a group of 5 people or 10 people, ask yourself, am I truly leading? And as we go through these calls over the course of the year, we'll figure out a little bit more about what leadership is all about. From my point of view, salesmanship and leadership are very closely aligned. Here's one thing to think about. General Eisenhower, who became President Eisenhower, for 40 or 50 years, he was in the military. And throughout that time, the military, of course, has a tremendous interest in this topic of leadership. And for many, many years, of course, he was thinking about what leadership is all about. How do you create the results that you want to have for yourself and those around you? And at the end of his career, they asked him, how do you define leadership? And he defined it in kind of a clever, interesting way. He said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want because he wants to do it. And so it's a kind of a clever way of highlighting the importance of making this connection between yourself and the other person and his or her interests or goals or desires. And so if we were to apply this definition to the sales setting, if we just shifted the words a little bit, if we shifted leadership to sales, what would this statement be? Sales is the art of getting someone else to buy something you want bought because he wants to buy it. I'm sure you can see the importance there, the link between, obviously, when we do pitches with people, or if we're negotiating with another agent over a deal, or maybe we're even negotiating with a potential vendor to provide something for us that we would like that vendor to provide, but we want that vendor to provide it willingly and gladly and without reservation because he or she knows it's in their best interest too. Right? And so true collaboration is when both people choose to show up in the relationship and offer what they have to create value together. And so the question then becomes, if it's about getting someone to buy something you want bought because he or she wants to buy it, then the question is, how do you make that connection? How do you get that person from the point of, who is this person who's talking to me, to, I willingly want to provide X, which is what you want that person to provide? Well, this idea of creating that connection and relating to that person in a way that he or she not only says, I want to be a part of this relationship, but I want to give this to the relationship. If it's a potential client, it's, yes, I want to be your customer. If it's another agent that you're negotiating with, yes, that deal will work for us. If it's a vendor, it's, yes, I want to provide this to you at this rate, in this particular way. That's the kind of input that we're looking for. Well, this led to this first principle that I will be talking about later in the program, but I'll just kind of throw it out here because it's important to the next couple of pieces. The first principle that you can think about to be successful for yourself in real estate or anywhere in life where you have a particular outcome that's important to you is to recognize that people will not be influenced by you unless and until they feel related to by you. Chirag sometimes talks about perceived value and actualized value. And he says perceived value is what you think you're offering that the other person values. Actualized value is what the other person believes you're offering that you value. And so the point here is the value is determined by the other person. Right? We have to always remember that the other person gets to vote. And therefore, we need to understand what that person would vote for. The opposite of this statement would be, people will be influenced by you when they feel related to by you. And so in that sense, then leadership and salesmanship are about the same thing. They're about helping other people feel related to by you so that they can be influenced, so that they will be influenced by you. And if you would like to influence them to buy you as a service provider, or you want to influence them to meet you halfway on a tough negotiation or something. In these cases, we're not talking about manipulating. We're not talking about tricking people. We're not talking about putting something over on someone. We're talking about relating to them in a way that they feel truly heard and valued and related to, so that they willingly say, yes, I choose to be a part of this. So how do we get there? Well, I want to borrow this concept from cultural anthropology. I've done quite a bit of cultural anthropology work, working with folks around the world because cultures are so different. Cultural anthropologists are the scientists that look at what happens whenever two human beings come together for any purpose, whether it's business, whether it's in a family, whether they come from the same town, whether they come from different regions in a country, when they come from different places of the world. Cultural anthropologists are studying what happens between one human being and another. What are the actions that take place? What are the impacts of those actions? And of course, we want to bring a real expertise to our work if our goal is to create an experience for another where he or she feels related to. We want to understand all the ways that we can do that, how we get there. And so in cultural anthropology, they have this concept of people as icebergs. As you know, icebergs tend to float in the water in a way that approximately 10 or 15% of the iceberg is above the water, whereas 85 or 90% of the iceberg operates below the water. If we apply this concept to human beings, the surface part, the part that's visible above the water, that is what you see in another human being, tends to be the very surface level stuff. You can observe what clothes they wear. You can observe the language that they use and how they use it. You can observe the behaviors that they engage in or don't engage in. You can understand the activities. But there's so much more to all of us than that we can't simply observe from the outside. What are the beliefs that a person brings into the relationship or the interaction at that time? What are the values that they carry with them on a daily basis? What are their assumptions? What are their judgments? What are their motivations, expectations, disappointments, concerns, viewpoints about trust, viewpoints about logic or risk? Every one of us carries all these things with us every time we come into any interaction with another human being. And many more things. This is just some of them. So if we're only looking at the surface, we might say, well, maybe I should match the language that my client uses, or maybe I should wear the same clothes that my client wears, or maybe I should wear clothes that transmit a message of professionalism or something like that. I understand the logic there. But if we're truly going to want to make someone feel related to, we need to think more about what's underneath the iceberg there. Now, you notice I snuck something in here. Perhaps a couple of you noticed in the lower list there, motivations, expectations, disappointments, and concerns. How many of you are familiar with the Med C? Yep, thank you. So the Med C is in there as well as so many other things. That was just kind of a little trick to throw it in there to see if people are still awake. But that's part of what really matters here. When we're talking about people's motivations, expectations, disappointments, and concerns, we're talking about some of the key elements that they're bringing with them at that particular moment in time. And so in the beginning of a relationship, it's a very effective tactic to do what you can to understand at least those elements that are underneath the iceberg. Now, when you start working with another human being, this is where it gets interesting and complex and confusing and can lead to some failures sometimes. Imagine you're here on the left, the other person is there on the right, and you're able to observe that person's actions and behaviors and clothing and all of that. And some of it might make sense to you. Some of it might not make sense, like you wonder why they responded in the way they did after you asked them a question or something like that. But there's only so far that we can get by simply observing someone else's clothing or language or behaviors or what food they like to eat or something like that. If we really want to have an experience for them where they feel related to, we can't be focusing on that stuff. We have to focus on that stuff. We have to focus our attention on understanding what the world looks like from their point of view. This is why politicians, for example, you can see a politician on the campaign trail. Let's say a national politician will go out to the Pacific Northwest, be talking about the spotted owl and some other kind of an environmental issue. And then the next day they're flying over to Iowa where they're talking all about corn subsidies. And then the next day they're in New York and they're out on the streets talking about safer streets and better schools for the kids, right? That's their attempt to connect with something that they believe that the potential voters in those particular areas care about, to relate to them. Or if you say it another way, Hillary Clinton, for example, famously left the White House and came to New York and was running for office, for senator in New York. And she said her tagline for all of her speeches during that time, year 2000, was, I may be new to New York, but I am not new to your concerns. And so that was her attempt to try to establish a connection so that the other people could say, well, she's from Arkansas, I don't have a connection with her. But if she can talk engagingly with me about things that I'm concerned about, that allows me to think that she can relate to how I see the world. And so the art of getting someone to buy something you want bought, or as a leader, the art of getting someone to do something you want done because he wants to do it or she wants to do it, is the art of connecting with what's underneath the iceberg so that the other person says, yes, I get that this person gets me. And if they get that this person gets them, they're far more likely to say yes to whatever it is you're offering. As soon as they say this person doesn't get me, there's no way they're ever going to buy what it is you're offering. And so one way to think about the sales process is nothing more complicated than understanding what's underneath their iceberg, or understanding, as I say, understanding what the world looks like from their point of view. And so then it's not really about talking about what it is you offer. It's not about, bringing up the value of Compass's great technology. If the person that you're talking with is someone who has, as Chirag has said in the past, 4 kids and a dog, what they value more than anything else in that transaction is somebody that's just going to take care of everything for them and make it easy for them and they don't have to think. But if you're there pounding away at how these great, we've got insights and we've got collections and we've got all this other tech stuff, you might lose them right at the get-go because that's not what they value at that particular moment. But if you're listening very deeply and you're asking good questions and you're learning what the world looks like from their point of view, if they are that frazzled parent with 4 kids and 2 dogs, they just need somebody to make the process smooth and easy for them. And so it's not about talking about what it is you have to offer. It's about establishing the connection with that person in a way that they feel the connection. In other words, don't focus on persuasion, don't focus on performance. If you want people to do something you want done because they want to do it, you need to focus first and foremost on connection and then contribution. Connection to what it is they care about, and then a contribution that is in alignment with whatever that is. This is a huge piece, and if we're going to get people to have an experience where they feel related to by us and therefore can be influenced by us, they have to feel connected to and hopefully contributed to. So ask yourself, here's a couple of things that you could do in thinking about these concepts or perspectives over the next week. You could think about how you typically pitch to people, or the way that you relate to a client at the beginning of a relationship or at any time, and ask yourself at any moment, am I trying to persuade or perform? Am I trying to say the right words? Am I trying to say them in the right way so that they sound really good so that they'll land with the person? There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely right. But it's not just that you're throwing it out there and hoping that it lands. A pitch is a response, right? A pitch is never a statement. It's a response. A pitch is a response to what you understand the lower part of their iceberg to be. And it's your response to whatever it is that's there. If we're simply going with a pitch, we're trying to say the right words, we're trying to talk about one thing or another without understanding what that iceberg is, then in a sense, we're just throwing darts against the wall and hoping we hit a target somewhere. It's like fishing into a pond when we have no idea, what we're fishing for. So ask yourself, how much of my mindset is built around persuading and performing versus connecting and contributing to what I find there? And then, of course, you can think about if you have something that, any client that you're currently working with, you're going to have another interaction with them tomorrow or next week or next month. You're going to have the chance again to connect and contribute there. And so ask yourself, what is it that person is likely to bring into our interaction at that point in time? What would be a live issue for that person at the moment? Is it that the sale of the house isn't going as they expected and they're getting frustrated? Is it that their kid is graduating the next day and that's a very exciting moment for them? Is it that they are about to leave for vacation, and so they don't really have much focus? They don't want to take too much time for that conversation? To always understand what's going on underneath their iceberg at any moment in time is one of the most valuable things you can do. And so whether you believe you're a salesperson or you believe you're a leader, to me, it doesn't matter. It's always the opportunity that you have to make a connection that the other person feels as a connection. The other person feels related to, because people will not be influenced by you unless and until they feel related to by you. All right, so we have a couple of minutes. Let me pull this down. So let's hear from a couple of you. Is there anyone who has a question about any of this? If so, please put it into the chat. If there's something that wasn't clear, something you're not sure about, please put it into the chat. And if you don't have a question, put something else into the chat. What stands out for you or resonates for you in anything that I've said today? Please put that into the chat. Thank you, Andrea. Q&A similar to the Med-C. So no, there is no single kind of Q&A process or something other than the Med-C. When Chirag and I came up with the Med-C, we were talking with each other. We were sitting right here, actually, in the office in the conference room, talking about what it is that's so important for us to make sure that we know early in the game, especially at the very beginning of the process. And that's where we realized that motivations, to understand the client's motivations, are very important. To understand the client's expectations are very important. To understand previous disappointments and any concerns they have are extremely important at the very beginning of the process. So we understand where they're coming from, what the world looks like from their point of view. We have not developed another kind of simple script or something like that, because as the relationship goes on, it becomes so complex. Anything could be happening at that person's life at any moment in time. But fundamentally, the approach is to understand what's underneath that person's iceberg at that moment in time. And so it could be any number of questions, any number of actions. Andrea, why don't you take yourself off mute and share your thought, please?
I was just about to. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So going back to your analogy of the father of 4 kids and the dog,
Yep.
One was assuming he just wanted to be taken care of. If it were somebody like my husband, he'd want to have a spreadsheet about what's going on so that he knows his 4 kids and the dog, we don't have either, are taken care of. Does that make sense? So
Makes perfect sense. Yep.
So I think what I took from this is we have to sort of take context clues by looking around and then maybe guessing. I would rather ask what their motivation is, or ask what their, if you had the iceberg up, I would be able to, look at the other things underneath it.
Yeah.
So that was what came to mind for me.
Yep.
And I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I think that what you said is important.
Yeah. So what I mean, maybe I wasn't clear enough. I would never mean we assume. What I meant to convey was, if we know that the person is frazzled, that was the key word in my sentence. If we know that the person is frazzled because his or her life is so crazy with the four people and the 2 dogs, then we know we need to address that somehow. And I agree with you completely. Some people might want the clear spreadsheet. Some people might just want to check out of the whole thing and just like offload it or outsource it to you, the agent. And so to make that true connection, of course, we have to understand enough to understand where they are, and of course, offer a solution. Would it be better for you if I created a spreadsheet for you, or would it be better for you if I just left you alone and managed the whole thing and talked to you once a week? They say, yeah, just take care of it and let me know. Okay, got it. Absolutely. Someone asked a question.
Thank you.
Ralph asked about contribution. So your pitch should be a contribution, right? By contribution, I mean adding value to that person's life at a moment in time, given whatever it is that's important to them. And that's why I say a pitch is a response. A pitch should not only convey that you understand what their situation is, but that you have something that they value that you're offering as a reflection of whatever that is. And so, if you're concentrating on connection and contribution, and you're always delivering an experience in the other of being connected or related to, and being contributed to, why would they ever go anywhere else? And so that contribution piece could take any kind of form, but it generally requires some kind of a connection first. Doesn't have to. Even a contribution could be something that doesn't require a connection. For example, let's say that you had a client who loves food, and they bought a house from you a year ago, and a new French restaurant opened up in town. You text the person, you say, hey, did you know about this new French restaurant? If you haven't been there, I was there last night. It was great. I know how much you love food. You should check it out one of these days. That is a contribution to that person's life, because you know that he or she loves food, and he or she may not know about the restaurant yet. You're contributing to that person's life experience, if you will. And so you might say there's no connection before that, but theoretically there is, because you already know the person loves the food. And so if we're focusing on aiming for always connecting and always contributing, as opposed to persuading and performing, we'll be much more successful in the long run. Our clients will say, I love my agent. My agent understands me, gets me, and adds value to my life. Okay, everybody, it's 12 o'clock. Delighted to see you all here. Would love to see you next week. Feel free to contact me anytime if you like. It's david@chiragshahcoaching.com if you ever have any other questions, something like that. Lovely to see everybody. We'll see you at the same time next week. Have a good week, everyone.